Good morning, friends. I am Sunil Desai and welcome to Galaxy Online Learning. So, we are on the second chapter of history, nationalism in India. And now, in this second lecture, we are going to see how the second unit of this chapter, that the differing strands within the movement, means how different groups sup- supported this movement for what their reasons were different. They looked towards Swaraj in a different way. Okay, so how the people from the cities, how the people from the villages, how the peasants, how the tribals, how the plantation workers, hmm, they took part, how they took part, and why they took part in the non-cooperation movement. That is what we are going to see in this chapter. Okay, all these people, they responded to the call of Swaraj, but the term Swaraj meant a different way for each of this group. So first we'll see the movement in the towns. The movement started with the middle class participation in cities. Thousands of students left government schools, colleges, then headmasters, teachers, they resigned. The lawyers gave up their practice. They stopped going to the courts. The council elections were boycotted in most part of the country except in Madras province. In Madras province, the Justice Party, which was a non-Brahmin party, they went for the elections because they thought that going for the elections and getting gaining some power will help them, because they were they thought that only Brahmins would get an access to power. So the Justice Party, which was a non-Brahmin party, they fought the council elections. Foreign goods were boycotted. People in the cities boycotted foreign goods. Liquor shops were picketed. Liquor shops were picketed. What do you mean by picketing? Picketing means people gather around the shop and they they tell the people, the person who is going to buy liquor not to buy. They persuade people from not buying liquor. Okay. Then foreign cloth was burned in huge bonfires, because of which what happened was that the import of foreign cloth came down from 102 crores to 57 crores between 1921 and 22. Just in 2 years, the import of foreign cloth reduced to half. In many places, merchants stopped doing foreign trade. People stopped financing foreign trade. Okay? As the boycott movement spread, people began discarding imported clothes and started wearing only Indian ones. As a result, production of Indian textiles, mills and handlooms went up. Okay, so what happened? In the economic front, the British government had a huge setback because people started using Indian cloth, which was made in Indian factories, Indian textile mills, and on handloom. But this movement gradually slowed down for a variety of reasons. First thing, the handloom cloth or the khadi was more expensive than the imported cloth, because imported cloth was been manufactured on a mass base on a machine, so it used to cost less. Okay. Then the khadi cloth, then how the poor could buy khadi. So the poor started again buying the mill cloth. Second, boycott on British institutions also became a problem, because there were no Indian institutions to support it. There were no, see, people boycotted government-run schools, but there were no Indian schools. There were no schools run by natives or Indians. Okay, so slowly, students started trickling back to these British schools. Teachers also started going back to teach in this school. Lawyers also slowly started going back to court. Okay, now this is what happened of the movement in the cities. Now let us see what happened in the villages, in the countryside. Okay. In our, see, people in the countryside or the villagers or the peasants were already fighting against the British government for their own causes, for their own reasons. In our, peasants who were led by Baba Ramchandra, a sannyasi who was earlier a bonded labor. He was a bonded labor working at Shizi. Okay, the movement here was against the jamindars, against the landlords, against the talukdars, who demanded from the peasants who used to till their land. What they used to demand? High rents and variety of other cesses. Peasants had to do begar and work at landlord's place. Without begar working means working for someone without money, without taking any money. Okay, the employers were not giving them money. Okay. So as tenants also, they had no security of tenure. The landlords used to give them land to till, but the tenure was not secure. Suppose if this year they have given, it was not necessary that they will give the second year the same land for that person to till. So there was no security. They were regularly evicted from that land so that they could not acquire right on that land. The peasant movement demanded reduction of revenue, abolition of beggars. So what the peasant wanted, while they were fighting, the peasant wanted reduction of revenue. They wanted abolition of the beggar practice and they wanted social boycott on oppressive landlords. In many places, Nai Dhobi Bandhs were organized by panchayats. To Nai Dhobi Bandh, Nai matlab barber, Dhobi matlab washerman. Okay? So, why was this Nai Dhobi Bandhs? So that the landlords should be prevented or restricted or were not allowed to use the services of barbers and washermen. In June 1920, Jawaharlal Nehru, along with Baba Ramchandra, he went around the villages in Awadh and they formed in October Audh Kisan Sabha, which was headed by Jawaharlal Nehru, Baba Ramchandra and few others. Okay, in October they formed his own Audh Kisan Sabha, an organization to fight for the rights of the peasants. And in a month or so, it had its 300 branches in the surrounding area. Just imagine how much the peasants must be suffering. 300 branches were growing in just a month. That means the peasants were really suffering because of this landlords. Okay. So, when the non-cooperation movement began the following year, the Congress wanted to integrate the Awadh peasant struggle into the wider struggle of non-cooperation, the wider struggle of freedom, Swaraj. But this peasant movement developed in such a way which the Congress didn't like. As the movement spread in 1921, the houses of talukdars and landlords were attacked by the peasants. Bazaars were looted and grain hoards were taken over. In many places, local leaders told the peasants that Gandhiji had declared that no taxes were to be paid and land was to be redistributed among the poor. The name of Mahatma Gandhi was being invoked to sanction all actions. I mean, the local leaders used to take Mahatma Gandhi's name to do whatever they will. Okay, to sanction all actions and aspirations. Okay, that was what happened with the peasant movement. Now, the tribal peasants, they had their own problems. Their problems were different. Okay, in the Gudem Hills of Andhra Pradesh, for instance, a militant guerrilla movement spread in the early 1920s. There was a guerrilla movement, okay, in the early 1920s in the tribal area of Gudem Hills of Andhra Pradesh. Here, as in other forest regions, the colonial government had closed large forest areas. The government had closed large forest areas and preventing people from entering these areas. So it did allow people to enter these areas. They could not send their cattle to graze in the hills or to collect firewood and fruits. This enraged the hill people. The hill people or the tribals got angry. So, because that was the only livelihood, they used to live on the forest. But now the large forest areas were cordoned off. They could not enter the forest. Okay. So, and at the same time, the government forced them beggar work to build roads. The people got really angry. And at the same time, what happened was that a person by the name Alluri Sitaram Raju, he claimed himself as a tribal leader. He said that he has some special powers and he said that he could heal people. If the people were ill, he could heal them. He could survive even bullet shots. He could even survive bullet shots. Even if you fire at him, he would not die. He could do correct astrological predictions. That's what he told the people, the tribals. So the tribals saw in him an incarnation of God. People thought, the tribal people who were illiterate, they thought this person, Alluri Sitaram Raju, is an incarnation of God. Raju talked of the greatness of Mahatma Gandhi. He was inspired by the non-cooperation movement and he persuaded people to wear khadi and give up drinking. He told the people that you should wear khadi cloth and you should give up drinking. But at the same time, he said that India could be liberated only by the use of force and not by non-violence, which was against the idea of Satyagraha which Gandhiji had put forth. The Gudem rebels attacked police stations and they attempted to kill British officials and they carried on guerrilla warfare for achieving Swaraj, which was against the ideas of the Congress in fighting for Swaraj. Raju was captured and executed in 1924 and he became a folk hero. So, tribals joined the non-cooperation movement for their own reasons. The peasants of all our joined the cooperation movement for their own reasons. Similarly, the plantation workers joined this movement for their own reasons. For plantation workers in Assam, freedom means right to move freely in and out of the confined space in which they were enclosed. It meant retaining a link to the place where they came from, because the British government had passed a law in the Inland Immigration Act of 1859, the British government stated that the plantation workers were not permitted to go out of the tea gardens without permission, and these permissions were also very rarely given. So the plantation workers were confined in the tea gardens. They could not come out of the tea gardens for years together. When they heard of the non-cooperation movement, thousands of workers defied these rules, defied the authorities, and left the plantations and started going home. But since the railways were not working, because the railway workers were on strike, the steamers were strike, they were stranded, and as they were stranded, the police caught them and they were brutally beaten up. So these plantation workers could not reach their home. So the visions of these movements were not defined by the Congress program. All these different groups, they interpreted the term Swaraj in their own ways. Imagining it to be a time, they thought that because of this movement, the time when all suffering and all troubles would be over. Yet, their reasons were different from Gandhi's reasons. But when the tribals chanted Gandhiji's name and raised the slogans demanding Swatantra Bharat, they were emotionally relating to the All India agitation. When they acted in the name of Mahatma Gandhi or linked their movements to that of the Congress, they were identifying with a movement which went beyond the limits of their immediate locality. That means they were taking part in a movement which was nationwide. Now, let us come to the third unit of this chapter, the civil disobedience. In February 1922, Mahatma Gandhi decided to withdraw the non-cooperation movement because he felt that it was getting violent day by day. In many places, and violent day by day, and satyagrahis needed to be properly trained. So, within the Congress, some leaders were by now tired of the mass struggles and wanted to participate in elections to the provincial councils that had been set up by the Government of India Act in 1919. They felt that it was important to oppose British within the councils and argue for reforms and also demonstrate that these councils were not truly democratic. Chittaranjan Das and Motilal Nehru formed a Swaraj party within the Congress to argue for a return to council politics. Motilal Nehru and C.R. Das, what they said, that instead of the non-cooperation movement, let us go and fight the elections and come back to the council politics, because that was one of the way to demand for Swaraj, to demand for reforms. But the young leaders, like his son, Motilal's son Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, pressed for more radical mass agitation and for full independence. So the views of leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose were just the opposite of what Motilal Nehru or C.R. Das felt. In such a situation of internal debate and dissension, two factors again shaped Indian politics towards the late 1920s. The first was the effect of the worldwide economic depression. Agriculture prices began to fall from 1926 and it just collapsed after 1930. As the demand for agricultural goods fell, exports declined. Peasants found it difficult to sell their harvest and to pay their revenue because the price had fell down. So it was difficult for the peasants to sell their goods, and it was difficult for them to give revenue to the government. By 1930, the countryside was in turmoil. Against this background, in Britain, a new government, the Tory government, was constituted, and this government brought a statutory commission under Sir John Simon. This set up in response to the nationalist movement. The commission was to look into the functioning of the constitutional system in India and suggest changes. Okay, the Tory government in Britain, it formed a commission under the chairmanship of Sir John Simon to study the functioning of the constitutional system of India and suggest changes. The problem was that this commission did not have a single Indian member. All the members of the council were British. So, when this Simon Commission arrived in India in 1928, it was greeted with the slogan, "Go back, Simon." All parties, including the Congress and the Muslim League, participated in the demonstration. Which demonstration? Go back, Simon. In an effort to win them over, the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, announced in October 29 a vague offer of dominion status for India in an unspecified future and a roundtable conference to discuss a future constitution. So, to win these people, to win the leaders of the Congress, the Muslim League and the other parties, Lord Irwin, what he announced was that he will give dominant status to India and there will be a roundtable conference where we can discuss the future constitution of India. But this did not satisfy the Congress leaders. The radicals or the people who wanted complete change within the Congress, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, became more assertive, whereas the liberals and the moderates in the Congress were proposing a constitutional system within the framework of the British Dominion. So, these liberals and moderates who were proposing for a constitutional system within the frame, they were outlined. They gradually lost their influence in the Congress. So in December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purna Swaraj, total change, total freedom. The Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purna Swaraj. It was declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as the Independence Day. So in December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as the Independence Day. When people were to take a pledge on that day, what the people have to do? They have to take a pledge to struggle for complete independence, Sampurna Swaraj. But the celebrations attracted very little attention. So, Mahatma Gandhi had to find a way to relax this abstract idea. Swaraj is an abstract idea. Okay, there is no concrete or physical thing like Swaraj. So Gandhiji wanted to relate this abstract idea of freedom to a concrete issue in everyday life. So what Gandhiji did to convert this abstract idea, people have to realize now what Swaraj is, what independence is. It's an abstract. You can't see Swaraj. Can you see? You can see a book. You can see a hand, an object, but you can't see an abstract idea. So Gandhiji thought that he has to relate this abstract idea into a concrete issue of everyday life. So what Gandhiji did was that Gandhiji found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation, because salt is such a thing which is used in daily in your day-to-day preparation of food. Okay, so on 31st of January 1930, Gandhiji sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin stating 11 demands. He sent a letter in which 11 demands were made. Some of these were of general interest. Others were specific demands of different classes, from industrialists to peasants. The idea was to make the demands wide-ranging so that all classes within Indian society could identify with them. In this, Gandhiji thought that it should contain demands of all classes of Indians so that they can identify with Swaraj. And everyone could be brought together in a united campaign. The most stirring of all was the demand to abolish salt tax on salt. Salt was something consumed by everyone, the rich as well as the poor, and it was one of the most essential items of food. The tax on salt and the government monopoly on its production, because the British government had monopoly, means no Indian was allowed to produce salt. Only the Britishers were allowed to produce salt. Mahatma Gandhi declared the most offensive phase of British rule that salt, the government is not allowing us to produce. So salt is a day-to-day use in food, day-to-day life. Okay. So Mahatma Gandhi's letter was an ultimatum to the British rule. Gandhiji said if all these demands were not fulfilled, he would, by 11 March, he said he would launch a civil disobedience campaign. Irwin was not ready to negotiate. So Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March, accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. Okay, this march was over 240 miles from Gandhiji's ashram in Sabarmati to the Gujarat coast at Dandi. That is called the Dandi Yatra. The volunteers walked for 24 days to reach the place called Dandi, which was 240 miles away from Sabarmati. That means they used to walk 10 miles a day. Thousands came to hear Mahatma Gandhi wherever he stopped, and he told them what he meant by Swaraj and urged them to peacefully defy the British. On 6th of April, Gandhiji reached Dandi, and ceremonially he violated the law by manufacturing salt by boiling sea water. So this marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement, because till then no Indian was allowed to produce salt. It was the Britishers' monopoly. So Gandhiji first did it by boiling seawater. He produced salt on 6th of April at Dandi, and this led to the beginning of the civil disobedience movement, means disobey the laws of the British Raj, of the British administration. Okay, disobeying the laws which the British administration had put on. That's called the civil disobedience movement. Now, how did this movement differ from the non-cooperation movement? People were now asked not only to refuse cooperation, but with the British, as they had done in 1921-22, but also to break colonial laws. Now they were told to break laws. Disobey laws means to break the British laws. Thousands in different parts of the country broke the salt law. They started manufacturing salt and demonstrated in front of the government salt factories. As the movement spread, foreign cloth was boycotted and liquor shops were picketed. Peasants refused to pay revenue and Chowkidari taxes. Chowkidari taxes means taxes collected at the gates while entering a particular town or a city. That was the Chowkidari taxes. They said, we won't pay these taxes, we won't pay the revenue. Village officials resigned, and in many places, forest people violated forest laws. They started going into reserved forests for grazing cattle, for collecting fuel wood. Worried by this development, the British government began arresting Congress leaders one by one, and this led to clashes in many places. When Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a disciple of Gandhiji, was arrested in April 1930, angry crowds demonstrated in the streets of Peshawar, facing armored cars and police firing. Many were killed. A month later, when Mahatma Gandhi himself was arrested, industrial workers in Solapur attacked police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, and railway stations. These were all structures of British government, British rule. A frightened government responded with a policy of brutal repression. What else the government could do other than brutally repressing this? And about 1 lakh people were arrested all over India. In such a situation, Mahatma Gandhi once again decided to call off the movement and entered into a pact with Irwin on 5th of March 1931. By this Gandhi-Irwin pact, Gandhiji consented to participate in the Round Table Conference, which the Congress had boycotted for the first time. The Gandhi-Irwin pact was signed, and Gandhi said that he is ready now to attend the Round Table Conference in London, and the government agreed to release the political prisoners. So, in December 1931, Gandhiji went to London for the conference. But the negotiations broke down and he returned disappointed. Back in India, he discovered that the government had begun a new cycle of repression. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru were both in jail. The Congress had been declared illegal. All this was against the Irwin Pact. The Congress had been declared illegal, and a series of measures had been imposed to prevent meetings, demonstrations, and boycotts. So, with great apprehension, with great anxiety, Mahatma Gandhi relaunched the civil disobedience movement. For over a year, the movement continued, but by 1934, it lost its momentum. That means the momentum means the force at which it was moving, slowly coming down. Okay. Now let us see how participants saw the movement. Okay. The social groups who took part in this civil disobedience movement, how did they look at this movement? How they saw this movement, let us have a look. In the countryside, rich peasant communities, that is, the rich peasants like the Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh, they were active in this movement. They were producing commercial crops. So, they were hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices as their cash income disappeared. So they were finding it impossible to pay government revenue. So they took this disobedience movement as a chance to refuse paying this revenue. For them, the fight for Swaraj was struggle against high revenues. But they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rates being revised. So, when the movement was restarted in 1932, many of them refused to participate in this movement. Okay. They entered this movement in 1930. They were ready to enter this movement because they thought because of this movement their revenues will be reduced. But Gandhiji called off this movement because it took a violent turn. But the revenues were not refused. So when Gandhiji again called on this movement, they refused to join the movement. The poorer peasantry were not interested in the lowering of the revenue demand. Many of them were small tenants cultivating land they had rented from landlords. As the depression continued and cash income dwindled, the small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. They wanted unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. They joined a variety of radical movements, often led by socialists and communists. Apprehensive of raising issues that might upset the rich peasants and landlords, the Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaigns in most places. So the relationship between the poor peasants and the Congress remained uncertain, means the poor peasants were not ready to support the Congress movement of civil disobedience when it was again relaunched in 1932. What about the business classes? How did they relate to the civil disobedience movement? During the First World War, Indian merchants and industrialists had made huge profits and become powerful. So they were keen on expanding their business. They now reacted against colonial policies that restricted business activities. They wanted protection against import of foreign goods and a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. To organize business interests, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, that is the FICCI, in 1927. They were led by prominent industrialists like Purushottam Thakurdas and G.D. Birla. The industrialists attacked colonial control over the Indian economy and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched. They gave financial assistance and refused to buy or sell imported goods. Most businessmen came to see Swaraj as a time when colonial restrictions on business would no longer exist. They thought what will happen in Swaraj? The restrictions on business would no longer exist and trade and industry would flourish without any constraints. But after the failure of the Round Table Conference, business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic. They were apprehensive of the spread of militant activities and worried about prolonged disruption of business, as well as of the growing influence of socialism among the younger leaders of the Congress. The industrial working class did not participate in the civil disobedience movement in large numbers except in Nagpur region. As the industrialists came closer to the Congress, workers stayed aloof because socialism was slowly growing and industrialists were believing in capitalism. But in spite of that, some workers did participate in the civil disobedience movement, selectively adopting some of the ideas of the Gandhian program. Like the workers started boycotting imported foreign goods as part of their own movement against low wages and poor working conditions. There were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and dock workers in 1932. In 1930, thousands of railway workers in thousands of workers in Chota Nagpur tin mines wore Gandhi caps and participated in the protest. But the Congress was reluctant to include workers' demand as part of the program of struggle. It felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide anti-imperial forces. Another important feature of the civil disobedience movement was the large-scale participation of women. During Gandhiji's short march, thousands of women came out of their homes to listen to him. They participated in protest marches, manufactured salt, and picketed foreign cloth and liquor shops. Many women went to jail. In urban areas, these women were from high caste families. In rural areas, they came from rich peasant families. Moved by Gandhiji's call, they began to see service to the nation as a sacred duty of women. Yet, this increased public role did not necessarily mean any radical change in the position of women that was visualized. Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home and hearth, be good mothers and good wives. And for a long time, the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. It was keen only on their symbolic presence. With this, we end this lecture and we will see how there were certain limitations to the civil disobedience movement. Okay, and these limitations will come to in the next lecture. But before that, I would like to once again remind you to register yourself and get your studies packs so that you can start studying, because these study packs contain a lot of questions and answers which you need to memorize, because in social studies you need to memorize things and you get to study from this study pack. So please register, contact me to get registered. You can get registered online too. Okay, so please get registered as early as possible. Okay, thank you.